Now's the moment. I'm looking at this thing on the mantelpiece, and I understand that I'm in hell. I tell you, everything's been thought out beforehand. They knew I'd stand here at the mantelpiece, stroking this thing of bronze, and all those eyes intent upon me, devouring me. What? Only two of you. I thought there were more. So this is hell. I'd never have known it. Do you remember all those stories they used to tell us about the brimstone and the fires and the torture chambers? The old wives' tales. No. There's no need of red-hot pokers. Hell is other people.
Hell is other people. So says Sartre in his play, No Exit. I suppose that there are moments in all our lives when, frustrated by the difficulties of intricate human relationships, we agree with him. In this play, Sartre makes his point by showing how any relation which two people can set up is always threatened by the presence of a third. Two people may come to accept each other, even if in no better way than by agreeing to respect each other's lives. But the third person is always entering in, bringing his objective point of view, and consequently causing the whole structure to disintegrate. This, by the way, says Sartre, is the reason why lovers like to be alone. The very basis of the revelation of the other person's existence, according to Sartre, is the realization that someone is staring at me. We all know the experience. I'm sitting, let's say, on a bus, an almost empty bus, and I start talking to myself or making some sort of awkward gesture or laughing aloud. Then I look up and I see that someone has watched me do it. And we all know the feeling of embarrassment, but why is it there? It doesn't mean that we've been doing something reprehensible. It means, according to Sartre, that we feel that we are simply objects, that we have an outside for the other person to judge, something which we can't control. Perhaps the best example of this is one of Sartre's. Suppose there is a man looking through a keyhole, watching something going on inside. Now, as he looks inside, as he watches this interesting episode, he is the only subject. The people in the world are absolutely objects, like the things in the world. But if someone comes down the corridor and finds him looking through the keyhole, then the situation changes. Because then his embarrassment is not due to any bourgeois shame at having been looking through a keyhole, but it's because he feels too acutely that he is like the objects he has been looking at. And at once he realizes he's both subject and object in the world. And this is a very disconcerting experience. What happens in this encounter with others is that there comes into being what Sartre calls a self for others. And this self for others, although it has no reality or true existence except in the mind of others, is nevertheless the thing by which I am seen and judged. For others, I am not the self which I am for myself, but I am that which they see. And I can never grasp the meaning of this self. Furthermore, I am accustomed to think of the world as being what I interpret it as being. But I realize sometimes, in bewilderment and pain, that my world is not the only world, that other people have made of the world what they like too. And I wonder then, well, which is the real world? One of the best literary presentations which I know of this sudden encounter with the subjectivity or consciousness of another person, what Sartre refers to as the look, is given us in a novel by Simone de Beauvoir, one which is called She Came to Stay. In this book, a couple by the name of Françoise and Pierre, a closely knit couple, have invited a little girl, Xavier, a little girl from the provinces, to come and stay with them for a while. Now this little girl throws everything into confusion, not through the usual fatal triangle which novelists are so fond of dealing with, for Françoise never really doubts that she is first in Pierre's mind and will always be there. But Xavier will not allow any other consciousness to be called valid except her own. She pronounces her own judgments on the lives of Françoise and Pierre, and suddenly makes them see themselves and their relationship as something totally new and strange. Françoise in particular feels defenseless before her and attacked. One evening, which is particularly difficult, Françoise just decides she cannot stand it any longer. Xavier has been impossible. Françoise bursts into tears and rushes out of the nightclub. Pierre follows, trying to find out what on earth can be the matter with her.
What's the matter?
I don't know.
Did I do something?
No.
Is it because of Xavier? Why did you cry then?
You'll laugh at me. It's because I discovered that she has a consciousness like mine. Have you ever felt someone else's consciousness in yourself? It's unbearable. You think I'm drunk. In a way I am, but it doesn't matter. Why are you so astounded? If I were to tell you I was afraid of death, you would understand. This thing then is just as real and just as terrifying. Of course, we know we're not alone in this world. We say these things just as we know that someday we're going to die, but when we begin to believe it...
Would you feel that there's something scandalous in Xavier's existence?
It only comes to me in flashes, you know.
And yet you do feel that it recurs from time to time.
It has to.
You're amazing. You're the only living being I know who is capable of shedding tears upon discovering in someone else a consciousness similar to your own.
Do you consider that stupid?
Oh, no, of course not. Everyone recognizes his own consciousness as absolute. Now, how can several absolutes be compatible? The problem is as great a mystery as life or death. In fact, it's such a problem that philosophers are breaking their heads over it.
Well, then why are you so astounded?
Now, what surprises me is that you should be affected in such a concrete manner by a metaphysical problem.
But it is something concrete. The whole meaning of my life is at stake.
Now, I don't say it isn't. Nevertheless, this power you have to live, an idea, body and soul, well, that's unusual.
But to me, an idea is not a question of theory. It can be proved, but if it remains theoretical, it has no value. Otherwise, I would never have waited for Xavier's arrival to find out if my consciousness were not unique in this world.
I can readily understand this problem arising apropos of Xavier.
But I've never had any difficulty with you, since I barely distinguish you from myself.
And besides, between us there's reciprocation.
How do you mean?
As soon as I recognize a consciousness in you, you in turn immediately recognize one in me. Now that makes all the difference.
Perhaps. In short, that's what friendship really is. Each renounces his preeminence. But What if either refuses to renounce it?
Why, then friendship is impossible.
Then what can be done about it?
I don't know.
Xavier never renounces any part of herself. No matter how high she placed someone else, even to the point of worship, that person would still remain an object to her. There is no remedy. One would have to kill Xavier.
In this battle to the death of consciousnesses, Françoise finally does kill Xavier. And this is because she follows to its logical conclusion one way of resolving the subject-object conflict, in this case what we might call a metaphysical murder. If we are going to have a struggle of subjects and objects, one obvious way of dealing with the problem is to decide that I will be the only subject. I will not tolerate anybody else as being a subject to look at me. This is, of course, the path of domination, in the simplest form, what you might call staring the other person down. We all know people like this, people who can't tolerate any other person's way of life, who have to tell everybody else just how to live, who can't see any point of view except their own. In its most extreme form, this is sadism. The sadist wants to capture and imprison the subjectivity of the other's freedom, in his body. He wants to make the other feel that he is a thing at the sadist's mercy. By mental or physical torture, he tries to make the other feel that he is nothing except this panting flesh, dependent on the sadist's slightest command. But the sadist fails. He can't help it. In the first place, he can never capture a subjectivity. The extent to which he can control the other person is only the degree to which the other person is made an object. Furthermore, the other person's look is always there. At the moment of the greatest torture, still the victim may look at his tormentor, and in this look, the sadist is judged. A less bizarre way of remaining the sole subject in the world is the path of indifference, a kind of self-willed blindness. Sartre points out that some people manage to maintain this state of blindness for almost a lifetime, going on forever with only occasional, brief, terrifying moments of the revelation of the nature of the other. Such a person doesn't hate others, but he acts as if they were nothing but objects. And by acting as if they are nothing but objects, he tends to imprison them in their roles, to treat the waiter as if he's only a waiter, the clerk in the store as if he's not a person, but merely a clerk, and friends as if the friends are nothing except instruments for a particular kind of pleasure for this person's subjectivity. But this path of indifference won't work either. In the first place, it's not only dishonest, it's dangerous. For at any moment, one of these objects in my world may suddenly look up at me, and I know that I have been judged. The look has been there, and I cannot erase it. And in the second place, I'm impoverished. For myself for others is necessary to me if I am going to reveal to myself what I am, what my possibilities are. And insofar as I refuse to let the other person pass judgment on myself for others, I am restricting my own growth. Now, even more extreme than the saddest position, and a kind of consequence of the failure of all of these efforts to be sole subject, there comes hate. This was François' way out. For hate, says Sartre, is basically the will to annihilate the other, to get rid of him completely. Again, it fails. Logically, if I'm going to annihilate the look of the other, I must annihilate all others, for I can never be sole subject unless there are no other people in the world. But aside from the fact that this is impossible, it can't succeed anyway. There will always be the memory of the other person's judgment. I would always have to live with the knowledge of what I had been for others. The opposite recourse is naturally to accept myself as being an object, to make myself only object. Here the extreme form is masochism, the opposite of sadism. The masochist is the person who finds it somehow delightful to have pain and domination from the other. It isn't because he enjoys the pain or the defeatism. It's simply that it's easier for him to let someone else be responsible for his being, rather than to try to take up the struggle of dealing with the world in which there are other people and being responsible for what one does. Rather surprisingly, Sartre puts love here as one way of making oneself an object. It is, of course, love in bad faith, and I should say that all these structures where we say that hell is other people are structures in bad faith. But before we try to consider just how love enters in here, we ought to look at another scene from a de Beauvoir novel. This one is The Mandarins. Here, Henri and Paula are having breakfast. They have lived together for a long time, thinking that they were in love with one another, and yet there's something in this scene which shows us clearly that at least one of the two is getting a little bit tired and finding the affair grown stale.
What are you planning to do today?
Nothing special.
But what?
Well, I think I'll call up my dressmaker and have her take a look at those beautiful materials you brought back.
And after that?
Oh, I always manage to find something to do.
By that you mean you have nothing whatever to do. I've been thinking a lot about you during this past month. I think it's a crime for you to spend your days vegetating inside these four walls.
You call this vegetating? When you love someone, you're not vegetating.
But loving isn't a vocation.
You're wrong. For me, it is a vocation.
I've been thinking over what I said to you the other day. I'm sure that I was right. You must start singing again.
For years I've been living exactly as I do now. Why are you suddenly concerned?
But during the war, it was possible to be satisfied just to kill time. The war is over now. Listen to me. You're going to tell old man Graypaw that you want to go back to work again. I'll help you choose your songs. I'll even write a few for you. I'll ask the boys if they would care to try their hand at it too. Just wait and see the repertoire we get for you. Whenever you're ready, Sabrio will get you an audition. I guarantee that he can get you star booking at the Club 45. After that, you're made.
Then what? Will I mean any more to you if you see my name on posters?
Of course not. Don't be foolish. Why is it that you're not willing to try? I try to write, and you want to try to sing. You have a talent for it.
I'm alive and I love you. And to me, that's not nothing.
You're just playing with words. Why don't you want to give it a try? Have you become that lazy? Or are you afraid? Or what?
Listen, even if all those vanities, success, fame, still meant something to me, I wouldn't start out in a second-rate career at the ripe age of 37. When I sacrificed that tour of Brazil for you, it was a final retirement. I have no regrets. Let's just forget the whole thing.
Yes. Without consulting me, you were only too willing to make that sacrifice. And now you seem to be holding me responsible for it. I have never been able to decide whether you really scorn fame or whether you were just afraid of not being able to attain it. But your voice is as beautiful as it ever was. So are you.
Not quite. And I know exactly how it would turn out. To make you happy, a handful of intellectuals would proclaim my genius for a few months, and then goodbye. I might have been a Piaf, but I missed my chance. Well, it's too bad, and let's just drop it.
But even if you can't take the world by storm, it would still be worth it. You have your voice, your special talent. Don't you think it would be interesting to try to get all you can out of it? I'm sure that you'd find life much more satisfying.
I find life satisfying as it is now. You don't seem to understand what my love for you means to me.
I do understand. But you won't do for love of me what I ask you to do.
If you had good reason for asking, I'd do it.
What you mean by that is you prefer your reasons to mine.
Yes, because they're better. You've been giving me a purely superficial point of view, wordy reasons that aren't really your own.
Whatever your reasons are, I simply don't understand them. All right, let's drop it. But I'm telling you, you're wrong.
Are you going to work now?
Yes.
On your novel?
Yes.
Good.
Paula wants to live for love alone. But what does this mean? Well, Sartre says it means she wants to be an object. But what kind of an object? She wants to be so fascinating an object that Henri's freedom will be ensnared to the point where he can do nothing except consider this object and tend for it. It's a double evasion. As is made very clear in this scene, Paula's wanting to live for love alone is at least in part due to the fact that she wants to escape the difficulties of a long career in which she's not quite sure of herself and her ability to carry through. And in the second place, what sort of love is this? Sartre says that love is a desire to maintain the other as subject, so that one can be object before him. But is Henri really free? Because Paula wants him to be free only so long as he devotes his freedom to her. And this is not much of a freedom. Now, Henri is wise enough to refuse. He is not going to be responsible. He wants her to live her own life and not make him the foundation of her being. Whether this is because he honestly feels this way, or whether it's because he's getting a little bored with Paula, I'm not sure. But in either case, his attitude is more correct, let us say, than hers. It's rather amusing to think how couples we know fit into this pattern of Sartrean relationships. There are the strong ones, where you find two very strong personalities who seem impelled to destroy themselves by this constant battle to the death of consciousnesses to see which one will come out as sole subject. And then there are the uneven ones, some of the successful marriages, where the strong personality and the weak personality get along together, the strong one being sole subject and the weak one being sole object. A balance, yes, but not really a healthy one. Offhand, it might seem impossible to have a relation where two people would each be trying to be made an object. But I rather think it happens. I think we all know cases where two people seem to find their whole reason for existence in each other's being. And yet, there's something pathetic about them. There's a sense in which, although they live for each other, they seem not to be really living in the world. De Beauvoir maintains that there is bad faith in the social structure involving the relation of the sexes. In her book called The Second Sex, she maintains that traditionally men have tried to make women the second sex, the other sex, equating the human with man, and then making of women the other. Some men, says de Beauvoir, do this cynically and openly. Women are toys, playthings. Others do it more subtly. They make of their wives or mistress the reason for their being, yes. But what she really is a talking mirror, sending back not a true reflection of the man, but the reflection which he has so carefully placed there. But this is all a broader thing than simply marriage or sex. We see it in family relationships, where parents love their child, oh yes, love the child so much that they devote their lives to creating him into exactly the object they want him to be. Or, on the other hand, love the child so much that they efface themselves completely, living only for and through the child, giving up all responsibility for a life of their own. And we see it everywhere, in the employee-employer relationship, the student-teacher relationship, even in the many unequal friendships that we see round about us. If we were to leave things at this stage, I am sure that we would all feel profoundly dissatisfied. Human relationships are often, perhaps usually, like this, but do they have to be? Is there not a love or a friendship in good faith? Of course there is, whether for an existentialist or for a non-existentialist. We've seen the germ of it already in the two scenes from the de Beauvoir novels. We saw how Françoise and Pierre agreed that in friendship one gives up the struggle for preeminence. One knows that when he recognizes the consciousness of the other is also recognizing his consciousness. And whatever his motives, Henri at least wanted Paula to live her own life, knowing that unless they grew separately, they could not grow as a couple together. The basis of all relations in good faith is fundamentally this: respecting the other as a free subject, valuing the uniqueness of others and of myself as well. It is a precarious structure. It is not an easy thing, for it means that one gives up forever the idea that one can predict and classify and fully understand the other, or that oneself can be fully predicted and understood. But human relationships are interesting because of this element of mystery and the knowledge of change. The relation with others in good faith of two free subjects is not paradise, or if it is a paradise, it's a terribly busy paradise requiring constant vigilance. But it is not hell either, and the very possibility of its existence perhaps helps us to realize that if hell is other people, it is a hell which we ourselves have created.
The scene from She Came to Stay was translated by Yvonne Moyes and Roger Senhouse. The Mandarins was translated by Leonard M. Friedman. Both books by Simone de Beauvoir were published by the World Publishing Company. The scene from No Exit by Jean-Paul Sartre was translated by Stuart Gilbert and published by Alfred A. Knopf Incorporated. The painting Sky Festival by Gordon Wagner, courtesy of the Denver Art Museum. This is NET, National Educational Television.